Spring Meeting 2024. I want to introduce myself. I am Mariana Campos, Director General of Mexico Evalúa, a Mexico City-based think tank devoted to the analysis and improvement of public policies. And I have to say that we follow the most comprehensive set of indicators for the energy transition in Mexico. And so we are very interested in this topic of climate change action. And I'm very happy to have this fantastic panel with me. I want to introduce my colleagues, and I will start with Mo Ibrahim. Welcome, Mo Ibrahim. He is the founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation that was established in 2005 to support good governance and exceptional leadership on the African continent. He's also co-founder and co-chair of the African Europe Foundation, which was launched in 2020 to reset and bolster African and Europe relations. So welcome, Mo Ibrahim. We also have here with us our friend Nasrin Elsheim, and she is a very outstanding environmental and climate activist. She has 12 years experience in this topic, and she has been working on issues related to policy, peace, security, migration, negotiation, adaptation, and different areas related to climate change. She was former President UN Secretary General Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change, and she has directed plenty of NGOs in this topic. So welcome, Nasrin. And I also have here Lionel Cinso, and he has an outstanding career as economist devoted to investment banking. He has worked also in the public sector. He served as Prime Minister of Benin in 2015, and now he has founded recently an advisory firm also on investment banking, but for Africa, the South Bridge Company. So welcome, Lionel. And I want to also welcome Remy Rioux. And you know, he's a very well-known expert in economics and international financial institution. Remy was named in 2016 CEO of the Development Agency of France. Welcome here. And well, he has done an amazing job in precisely the financing of climate change. So welcome, the four of you. I'm really happy to have you here, and I hope I can take out all the best of you and the most useful information for the persons that are here with me, because you guys have great knowledge and experience on the topic. So let's start the conversation. You know that, well, we don't sit in the best place in the climate change indicators. We know we closed a very tough year, 2023, with some new levels on our. It was a very warm year. I think it was the warmest year, and also we surpassed some of our previous records in carbon dioxide and in methane and nitrous oxide. So we are still remain that we have to work a lot more on this front. And we know that the world is battling on a perfect storm of climate, conflict, economic, and nature crisis. We know that this is exacerbating inequality and pushing more people into poverty. It's like we are in a vicious cycle where for developing countries has become more difficult to engage in climate action. It's becoming more difficult. It's the climate crisis increased poverty, and they also have to fight poverty, so it becomes harder to go into the climate action agenda. So it's a vicious cycle that we need to break, and we know that financing Those actions are key, especially for the developing countries. So we know that the successful plan must coordinate and integrate the climate actions and the development. It can't go apart. So in this panel, we are trying to address this twin urgency of climate transition and development. And we want to start the financial reality as it emerges with, we need immense funding, and this is required for both urgencies. We know that also fiscal resources remain constrained. We know that public finance is not going to be enough. We need the cooperation of the private sector in order to solve this dilemma. And then I don't want to take more time. I'm going to jump into the questions for our actors, and I'm going to start with my friend Mo Ibrahim. Please, I think that we want to start more into the geopolitical challenges that we're facing in order to address finance and development. So we know that soon, this year in September, the United Nations will hold the Summit of the Future. It is described as a moment to mend the eroded trust and demonstrate that international cooperation can effectively tackle current challenges, as well as those that have emerged in recent years or may be vet over the horizon. This aim of the summit is twofold: to accelerate efforts to meet our existing international commitments and to take concrete steps to respond to emerging challenges and opportunities. How do we make sure that this summit will have a real impact and actually improve global governance? How can we build back trust in the multilateral system when it is being so challenged? Can you comment on that? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Really, we are going through a very difficult phase, and I am not very optimistic about where we are going. We see a total fracture in the world order, lack of cooperation. At the moment, where we really need cooperation in order to deal with a lot of serious issues threatening us. And I say us, not the planet, because the planet is fine. It will always be there. It is us, we have a problem. And what we see is a total collapse in the world order. The people who create the post-World War II structure are all in denial, and I really don't know where we go. We need to cooperate, and we're spending much more money now on arms because of the deteriorating financial world situation than any time in the history. When we are threatened with extinction, we're spending more money on arms and killing each other. I mean, what kind of human race, or what kind of species are we? I think we are really in a very bad spot, and I am sorry to say I'm very, very concerned about where we're going. We're hurtling towards a very difficult situation. I'm sorry to appear to give negative message, but guys, wake up. This is not sustainable. And whatever, we keep having summits and meetings, whatever, but it is not working. It's not working. We need to change completely the way we are dealing with each other, and this cannot continue what we're doing. Just one word about climate, since climate is one of the main issues here. I think the main problem is the guys who cause the problem are in denial. It is not the development, it is not Africa who caused this problem, it is other guys. And those guys are in denial. You can measure development of any country by the amount of carbon they put up there. Absolute perfect correlation. This is the guy responsible. Now, if you break it, yeah, you sort it out. It's your problem. It's not Africa problem. We did not put this up there. And we are the most affected people of what happening. Our loss of GDP due to climate change is 48 or 50 billion dollars a year. That's the damage and loss happening to us every year because of what those guys did. And then they turn and lecture us about we need to, no, you cannot have fossil here, you cannot have gas because actually we're putting up, most African countries put up like 0.2, 0.19, 0.25 ton per person per year of carbon. Okay, less than 1 ton. Americans put 15 tons per person. Europe, Japan, China, they put 7 tons per person. Stop this stupid action. You need to deal with that. Don't come to me and compromise my development because of your mishap. But they are in denial. The only solution for the climate problem, forget about all these crap funds, fund for this mitigation, with peanuts is nothing. The only way, if we are serious to deal with climate, is a global carbon tax. Is that not the market? You guys have been teaching us about the market. That is the way market works. Global market, you want to use 15 tons, go ahead, but pay. Then the funds are available there to preserve the Amazon, to preserve the Congo Basin, etc. Why should Africans keep their forests? We sink more carbon. We sink more carbon than what I was there. We are already net zero. Guys, we are net zero. And you guys are talking to us, excuse me, and why we should keep our forest for the benefit of all. Guys, pay for it. This is the kind of conversation we need to have. And if we are really honest and we have a difficult, but unfortunately, as I said, we are in a difficult place with people in denial, with the global order is breaking around us. Rule of law, there is no rule of law anymore around us. Ukraine go, Russia go into Ukraine, Israel go to Gaza. What is this nonsense going on? Anyway, sorry, I stop here.
Well, I think you have a point, and you have a great point. And maybe the next conversation is going to be very interesting with Nasreen El-Saim, where I would like to then ask you, what do you think, what do you think that fair transitions mean, and what they mean to you, if we're speaking of this inequality in this crisis?
I have a trouble now because Mr. Mo said all what I wanted to say.
He started with the conclusion.
Yes. So basically, what I wanted to say is that I like the slogan of the conference, which is fair transition. But I had a question: what are we as Africans transiting from in the first place? And I think by answering this question, we can really find an actual solution to the dilemma that we are in right now. So basically for us, transition is transiting from not having access to electricity in the first place. We have a coverage of less than 40% for the whole continent, into an actual access to electricity. It's up to us and our partners also to decide if this access is going to be green and clean, or we will have some sort of a Vietnamese development path with a lot of industry, for example. And then I like the opening statements about the agriculture in Africa, but we don't want to transit from being less producing for food to more producing for food that goes outside of the continent without being able to feed our own people. We also don't want to be put in this side of, yeah, you feed the world and we do the industry. And then we have to import all of the other means of actual production because we export all of the raw materials and then we get everything manufactured from outside. And this we lose 70% of the actual capital and actual value of the thing because we send it raw and we get it back manufactured. We don't want a scenario where a partnership, as they call it, so the title of today's session is South-North Partnership, where this partnership actually create more patterns of dependency instead of actual partnership where we look at each other as equals, as people who have something to provide and other people who have something to provide, and then we go together in a win-win situation, not less win, more win situation. I think the discussion can be very long about what is fair transition for me, but the biggest question is what is fair in this world that we're talking about. So I have a small pictures here. I hope they are clear for people, where a tree is providing one apple to someone and not providing anything to the other person, and this is called inequality. And then on the other hand, we have someone who gave 2 ladders to the post people to be able to reach the tree, but the person who have access to apples already will have more access to apples, while the person who didn't have access to apple, even with the ladder, will not still have access to apples. And then we have the equity. Wow. Where the person who have less access get a taller ladder to be able to actually access more tree than the person who already accessing apples in the tree. But is it enough? Is it enough? That's the question. And for me, the first transition is the justice, where we don't solve the problems by giving ladders to it, but solving the root causes of the problem. So instead of allowing the tree to bend on one side, which is the case of the world today, the tree is always bending to west somehow. We allow the tree to stand still and provide the same for the both sides, and this is the justice in the fair transition that I am talking about. It is not easy for me as a Sudanese specifically these days to talk about fair transition when we don't really have a governance structure, when we don't even have a country in place. And I'm sorry to talk about Sudan, not because I'm Sudanese, but because Sudan is a perfect example of a lot of catastrophes at the same time. So we don't want a development process where there is another diamond rush or blood diamond or blood cobalt or blood gold or blood resources. How can we make what we actually produce is fair for the people on the ground and fair for the country that's providing is a very big question that we need an answer for. So transition is possible. Transiting from what to what is a big question. But if we really want a fair transition, then it should be an agile, holistic, just, and very much considering to the people and the planet of the places. And this is what we call a fair transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazreen. I think your images are very, very clear, and I think everybody of us is going to remember the justice picture and how it's important to take into consideration the gains and losses of these crises, and not only of the crisis, of the past also. So we have to take into account gains and losses of the past, of the crisis, and of the future. And we have to make sure that people that are losing something are going to gain with this governance and with these plans. So I'm going to go fast to Lionel. Lionel, please talk us about, I mean, we know that public finance is insufficient to address the climate action and also to finance the developing countries' action plans. We know that private sector is key to these transitions, but at the same time, it cannot shoulder the entire burden on its own. So how can the private sector contribute to these efforts, and how do we ensure that sufficient allocation of concessional resources to developing countries won't be substitute, for subsidies that are not really tackling the problem, that will be just more into benefiting someone, but not really the entire public interest. So how can we foster effectiveness and we make sure it's warranted? I know I'm asking a lot.
Bonjour à tous. Est-ce que vous m'autorisez à parler canadien?
Am I allowed to speak Canadian or French and English?
Je vais peut-être commencer en français.
I will start with French.
Avant de répondre à votre question, je voudrais dire
To answer your question,
que je partage complètement
I concur with
de colère
the anger, with the words that were uttered in the introduction on how Africa is regarded, is considered on these double transition or fair transition issues. And I totally share the emotion of our young sister. The word fair is important. Justice is very important in a world where inequalities linked to these changes are rising and made worse. You asked a question which is a bit more financial and which allows me to be a bit less pessimistic than what we heard in the two first interventions. We heard about governance in countries and relations between countries. We heard about tensions, geopolitics, but it's not just about states. I worked as a minister in my country, in academia, in the private sector, and I'm always interested in the players acting in this transition and people who give us hope in such a transition. And we need to be able to measure such a transition. There are African solutions in terms of energy transition, but there are such solutions in agriculture as well. This topic is it illustrates the current situation. In some countries, people working in agriculture represent 50% of the active population. In France, this percentage is only 2%. In Benin, it's 28% of GDP. But I see progress. I do not only see tensions. I look upon the first rank in this assembly, and I can see ministers, among which the minister of Ethiopia, who works in support of a great agricultural foundation, and who led Ethiopia in very difficult climate conditions. And these efforts led to two-digit growth and a formidable modernization of agriculture. And I'm also thinking of OCP, and I'm thinking of the fertility map in Benin. Benin, which harbors great agricultural input companies, and much effort is done in that regard, in financing, for example. We are in a fantastic place for knowledge. When we are here at the UMCSP, we see a lot of private companies working in nutrition, on the development of an efficient agriculture, but also on a sustainable agriculture. When I see this, I'm thinking there are players who prove to us that we are in the right direction. And this is an idea that we can have of relations between states and governments. But this is taking place in academia, in the private sector, and the work of Mo Ibrahim in the positive development through his foundation, the organizations and the large philanthropic foundations are great players in financing. So the financial sector per se is not the only player. The Rockefeller organization and other philanthropic associations spend billions of dollars each year, and they are great players in financing. So let's not just talk about public financing, and we can't only speak about concessional financing, of which there is not enough, of course. There are other forms of financing. And as far as I'm concerned, I think we need to focus on the mobilizing of the private sector. So moving away from only talking about development banks or only about large industrial companies. Investors, people who have large savings, do not have sufficient knowledge of Africa, and they have a hysterical perception of risks.
There is an hysterical perception of risk, an overestimate of risk in the financial spheres among the investors communities. Ça, c'est quand même un sujet. Et donc, on s'en occupe dans chaque pays d'une certaine manière en essayant de dérisquer.
So we are trying to de-risk the situation.
Ce qui inhibe
We are trying to do away with what inhibits investments. But we need multilateral institutions, forums such as this one, all that we did in Paris in June. All of this must help us secure the savings in the world, which are more than enough to finance the global transition, because those are profitable choices that we can make in Africa. In my country, when we want to work with sustainable aviation fuel, we can work with manioc, for example. So we can go up the value chain in agriculture with fertilizers, with seed selection. So with that, we can raise productivity. And when we have security and job safety, we can accomplish fantastic progress. So we're working with biofuels. We do not put food security at risk because productivity gains are such that we can meet the food needs by producing calories that are inexpensive, but at the same time, we can produce biofuels that are ecological. So we are not bogged down in contradictions, but it's very capital intensive. And to this day, we still haven't found the means to build trust. in order to secure sufficient savings. And I'm currently working on projects that fund the energy transition. They are easy to finance in Europe, in Oceania, and in other places. It's much easier to work on reforestation in Africa and in Oceania than in Africa. It's much less time consuming because it's easier to build trust. And there we do not face any liquidity issues. But the most important thing here is to provide profitability opportunity and to build trust in the investment community in order to secure legitimate use of savings around the world.
Well, I felt like some hope. So thank you, Lionel. I think it's very important to underline that these transitions can be profitable, and that we need to tell the right stories. We need to address correctly the risk. We don't want to say there's less risk than the risk that they have to face, but we don't want to say that there's more risk. So it's very important to build trust in order to really take advantage of the great amount of savings that we could be using for these ends. So thank you for giving us some hope and with the private sector. And I think I have to move quickly with Remy. Remy, I really want you to share with the people all the work and all the activities that you have witnessed in the last year. And because you know that in last June, France convened the summit for the new Global Financing Pact, where 300 global leaders identified a series of reforms and initiatives to be implemented in 2023 and 2024. Almost a year on, where does the international community stand on implementing the Paris Pact for People and the Planet, the 4 Ps? If you can tell us about the reforms and the tools that have been developed, I think it would be awesome if you have some examples. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana, and if you allow me, I will also speak in French, comme Lionel, et vous saluer.
Just as Lionel, I'd like first of all to greet you all this morning.
Je me placerai plutôt ce matin du côté de Mo et Nisrine.
I would agree with Mo and Nisrine this morning, and at least take their point of view to share with you this feeling of emergency and frustration at the same time. But first and foremost, I'd like to thank the Kingdom of Morocco and the OCP, Mustafa Terab, UM6B for hosting the Forum of Paris for Peace. Congratulations to Justin, Fabien, Angel, and the whole team. I think it's really very important for the very first time to have this meeting held in Africa, in Morocco in particular, in this very specific circumstances. Paris has been launching on a very regular basis since at least 2015. Dear Isabella, remember the COP21 and the Paris Agreement on Climate. So Paris has been proposing formats, proposals, initiatives for a collective action, multilateralism. On behalf of the United Nations, we did it with the One Planet Summit. We also did it with the Paris Peace Forum in November 2018, and more recently, back in June, at the level of heads of state, to address this topic that is dealt with normally by bankers, by governors of central banks, and the ministers of finance, i.e. the transformation of the financial system. So, being able to discuss this topic here today in Bangor, it is indeed paramount, because calls have been made repeatedly, but at some point we need to find concrete collective responses. And in particular, in a southern country, a committee that is so committed to Africa, a country that has launched the Atlantic Initiative, and a country that has a strong position in the international governance. I'm talking about Morocco. Now again, I think of what Nisrine was saying about aspiring for more equity and justice, but we have to find the ways to make this materialize. We have made those choices already back in 2015, but this is lagging behind. We're waiting too much. We need to see these choices and ideas materialize concretely and efficiently. But to do so, we have to make sure that we all commit to this debate and try to find out the new shape this will take. The North does need the South, I would put it this way, simply. And the South also needs the North. Mo said it previously, but the presidents of the G20, because this is the place that we have chosen to discuss these matters. And I think of the role of Brazil this year after Indonesia. I think also of South Africa next week. They're all being very instrumental in creating this new shape of relationships. I think we have to overcome this opposition between climate and development, and this is the title, the topic of our conference, and this is the choice that we have made with the SDGs back in 2015. Of course, the impulse, the emergency is the impact of climate change. That's why we need to act quickly, but we should also involve our citizens and the social and political component immediately in each one of our actions. And Lionel also is right. We need that framework that goes beyond this traditional opposition between private and private funding. And let's not also forget this security net that we need to provide to the most vulnerable. We need to protect and fund the most vulnerable, but at the same time, we have to leverage on private funds to reduce the greenhouse effect emissions and protect our environment. So this new framework differs from the one we had in the past, the development financing, the 60s, and the climate finance that was decided back in 2010 and 2020. We need to reconcile these two options within a new framework, and this is what Mo has been doing. We need also to talk about new political policies that can materialize this common objectives and making sure that we have more equal, fair ways of lives. Things are not what were expected. There's a contradiction now because the world is more homogeneous, more common, but the regimes and the shapes, political shapes we witness seem to oppose. So how can we, again, discuss and try to find common grounds in our action policies and guidelines? This is, I think, the job, and this is the message of this new summit of the new financial pact, apart from the technicalities it has. But again, I remind you of what was said in the conclusions of that summit. 4 very easy and simple things. Let's stop opposing climate and development. Each country has its own pathway that must be respected. There is a shock of concessional funding, more international solidarity, and at the same time we need to raise private fund for our common goals. Very 4 basic messages, and somehow we're not doing it right. So at some point we need to move forward on this. Now, Lionel said something about the development public banks, and this is a strong message we are all hearing. I'd like to pay tribute to the Caisse Dépôt Gestion, CDG, the Fund Mohammed VI, the Communal Equipment Fund, all those financial public institutions of the Kingdom of Morocco that we're quite familiar with, but more largely all those public banks in Africa, 530 worldwide. It amounts to 15% of world investment, $2,600 billion of public investment each year that can support these political common objectives and make sure that we can create, shape up this new framework. And this is urgent. This is the common finance, and this is not in opposition to the private sector. The idea is to work with all stakeholders of the private sector, foundations, corporations, central banks. I just wanted to bounce back on what our three speakers said previously. I do share this feeling of emergency that we have, and also tell you that there's the Forum of Paris and other arenas where we are looking all together for solutions. But really, we do need a new framework. We cannot just talk about development, public aid to development, and get out from the typical climate negotiations. There are sustainable development goals, but we need this new public framework for all of us. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. I think we need a new approach. And also developing countries are very different among them. And we have different levels of development in those countries. And, you know, I come from a country where I see clearly that there is no political will to go into climate. It hasn't been in the past 6 years. Maybe now that we change our president, I think I'm positive that we're going to be more compromised. But we haven't been in the 6 years, and we cannot blame it to the development part. We have to blame it into the political will. That's the case of Mexico. Going through, we have very, very few time, and I just want you to conclude for 30 seconds each of you. That's a huge challenge. And I would like to start with Ibrahim.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I just need a little bit more than 30 seconds. Because I think
okay, 45 seconds.
Because
sorry.
There are a few points I think needed to be made here. First, the private sector. For 30 years, I've been hearing about the fantastic private sector will come and solve the problems in Africa or whatever. First, we accept that the money is in the private sector. They, you know, the IMF and the World Bank, they don't have much money, those guys. Very little, actually. Overseas Development Fund is minuscule. Trillions of dollars in the private sector. But it is not happening, and it will not happen. For simple reason, the cost of capital in Africa is just too high. That is it. That's why it's not happening. It has to be dealt with. Why? You look at the rating agencies, and 52 countries in Africa are labeled as sub-investment grade. That takes half of the investors out who by law cannot invest in sub-investment grade assets. And the other guys, of course, want an African premium. They want 25% IRR on their investment. And that cannot happen. So that is the issue. And these ratings, half of it, the factors there are subjective. And that we need to have a discussion here. So that is it's a real problem. So let us stop talking about it will not come because it doesn't work. Cost of capital is too high. That's one thing I think we really need to mention. Now, private sector is not a charity. Private sector goes for profit. So we don't ask private sector, please come and help. It will not. It can only invest, and that's lovely. If they invest, create jobs, but that's how it should be done. But private sector should pay its taxes. This is the problem of Africa. We have a serious problem of Africa called illicit financial flows. Africa loses every year $100 billion every year. More than ODA, more than the water bill, all the do-gooders, more than anybody. We're losing this money. Why? Because these wonderful companies shift their profits. They may misprice their products, which these companies are the great companies in the north and in the east now as well. And we keep asking governments, can you please upgrade the laws? I mean, Angel, before you left OECD, you were supposed to do that report on profit shifting, and nothing happened. You guys asleep. And because that is the problem. That is the problem. And this is taking money out of Africa. There's something, please remember that, illicit financial flows. This is corruption. This is corruption. And our friends in the north love corruption. Love corruption if they can get away with it. Remember that bribery was legal until 30 years ago. And under pressure, then they hold the foreign corrupt acts, etc., etc. We need to raise our voice to stop a serious form of corruption. So that's also a problem. Third,
excuse me, so for you,
countries in distress.
international cooperation in the front of corruption and
Coopération internationale pour lutter contre la corruption, oui, ça ne s'est pas produit depuis 20 ans. Nous avons...
There's something coming here.
Yeah. So you're proposing that cooperation.
Yeah,
into
we
fiscal
really
front.
need to deal with corruption, because that is a serious corruption, and we need to call it corruption. And the governments in the north and the east are responsible for that. And intentionally they're doing nothing. Only they started to worry when the British government, the French government discovered that Google doesn't pay tax, Apple doesn't pay tax. Excuse me, this is happening all the time. Every company in Africa. Wake up. So that is important. We stop hypocrisy and double standards. We need to act on that one. Thirdly, the Paris Club, which dealing with debt and countries in debt distress, is not adequate anymore. Most of the creditors are outside this club now. We need a new structure there. That is important. These are the key issues if we want to deal with that efficiently and quickly. Now, it's not only we blame others. We Africans also sometimes act very stupid. Actually, most of the time, we act in a stupid way. I mean, we lost $47 billion in 1919 because of tax concessions we gave to companies, unneeded, unnecessary. Why we offer tax incentives? Nobody offers tax incentives except the Africans. Guys, stop doing that. We lost $47 billion in taxes. That's equal to the foreign aid. Stop this stupidity. Collecting tax. We have a very low tax collection in Africa. Our pension funds are not investing in Africa. They're investing in the US and, excuse me, you invest. So we have to be fair. We just don't blame those guys in the north. We also shooting ourselves in the foot. And we have to act on all this. Sorry, I thought it was important to flag just a few points. If I take more time.
Thank you. So I get that you propose, yes, to go to the fiscal front and to a new international agreement on that. So you want to continue, please, Nairem? I ask you, sorry, just
Be brief.
be very brief.
Okay. First of all, I think while the governments are updating their taxation, my trajectory to solve this problem is actually alternative governance structure, and by that I mean civil society, to be more precise. In many countries, especially in fragile countries, countries with 2 governments, 3 governments, or no governments at all, the chances of having an actual investment or actual development is actually 0, even minus in some places. But then we find that there is always civil society that is actually trying to bridge the gap, or at least hold the country together for a while and serve the population. And as much as we strengthen these alternative governance structures, I think it is very good, at least for a while, to depend on something that is grassroots more and more until maybe we find peace in the world. Because with this rate, maybe more and more conflicts will happen, and then we really need an alternative structure. Very quick thing also, Mr. Remey here asked the question on how can we move from just talking to actual acting, and I think the question is going to him first, basically. I mean, sorry, I don't mean to put the spotlight on you or the AFD, for example, but let's review how are we dealing with the different actors, specifically youth and civil society. How many, and this is like a really direct question, I know maybe you don't have it on top of your mind, but maybe how many youth-led organizations or youth-led solutions that the AFD managed to actually not only fund but also support technically, technologically in the past year? And this is maybe, it will show you how much lack of support. I mean, I get invited to many conferences and many panels, and everyone clap and shake my hand with a smile, this was great. But then the moment we move to the next step of actually implementing what they thought it was great and clapped for 2 minutes ago in the panel, they start having urgent meetings or urgent phone calls. So instead of we actually stop this, I don't want to call it hypocrisy, but soft diplomacy into action-oriented diplomacy, things will keep as it is. And a lot of people have by far more interest to keep things as it is. So who are the pioneers? Who are the people who say, yes, we know the bureaucracy, we know the reporting system, we know that the organizations or the youth-led have to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we believe in these ideas. We believe that change should happen now, and this is why we should find solutions to these problems. Because reporting, for example, or admin things are things that we understand it, and we have solutions for, even in the very hard conditions, even during sheltering, during bulleting, during firing, during all of the very hard circumstances. We have solutions for things. It's just the other side have to believe that these people are dying anyway, are taking care of everything on the front line, and maybe they can do their work better with a little bit of support from our side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Then, Lionel, I think we have to move fast with you. And
Merci.
what are your comments?
De même qu'il n'y a pas de contradiction.
I don't think there is any contradiction here between the development objectives and the energy transition objectives. There is no contradiction between anger and action. There is no contradiction between the sense of urgency, as this was very strongly expressed earlier on the sense of injustice and sense of lack of solidarity and the need to take action. This is a work of cooperation. It takes cooperation on mobilization and moving from the words to the deeds. And despite corruption, despite inequalities, despite all this bad tax system and tax evasions. So my country, like many others, don't only work with the northern countries, we work with Morocco and many other countries, because cooperation is much more universal than the simple listing of the rich countries in the north and the vulnerable countries. But believe me, the north is also vulnerable, facing this energy transition, and this is universal. And my country is going to double the crop of manioc and the production of corn, etc. So despite all these obstacles, so we need to split the work. We need to have activism, we need to express the ambitions and the means and the real and tangible means of Africa, but on a daily basis we have so much on our plate and so much to do that has to do with the academia, with the progress, with the enterprises that would be playing on a and a fair game, with a sense of philanthropy, with a very global cooperations and sense of general interest. I don't see any contradiction here. So, Rémi, votre dernier.
Quelques mots d'espoir pour conclure.
Well, a couple of words of hope to conclude with. Do not believe, first of all, that our population are hostile to sustainable development and international cooperation. I honestly don't believe so. We have published a couple of weeks ago a poll, and we have asked pretty much the same questions to the Polish, to the Swedish, to Italians, to the French and German. And the message was crystal clear. A very full awareness and consciousness about the global challenges and stakes, very strong support to international cooperation actions, and anxiety and fear. These are words that are unspoken. We're not told what it is possible to do. If we look towards Africa, and Madjoul is here to testify it, let's look at and take a look at the recent Senegalese elections. And the sign is clear. The African youth, over 2 million of young Senegalese that have candidates and elected. And this is a hope. And another sense of hope is that there are things going on in the financial sector. Of course, it's not going too fast or fast enough, but there are a lot of discussions here and there, and they go beyond the classical and incumbent lines that were fixed a long time ago, and that needs to be further defined and clarified. So half of what we do, 14 million euros or billion per year, goes through the governments, but the other half goes through the private sector, municipalities, public corporations, and also youth, civil society. So we have, well, a window through the French government to support women organization, youth organization. Maybe we're not doing enough, and we're not the only ones to actually ask these questions and redirect our actions. So there are a lot of momentum in the civil society and public sector, but this needs to be debated. This needs to be acknowledged and fixed as full political priorities and have mandates. So all this motion, all this movement needs to find its political shape at a certain point if we really want to build that momentum, move further, and achieve what it is that we want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Rémi. So I think we are getting to the end. We are not going to be able to have questions, but I want to thank everyone, and please join
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're running a bit late. I think this was a wonderful panel, very interesting, very important panel. We're running a bit late, so you can still have a coffee. I saved the coffee break for you, but we will reconvene at 11:30 sharp in all the different sessions that we have. 11:30, the next sessions will begin. Thank you.